Afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us on the Myerson Coffee Couch today. It's Wednesday, the 28th of October. If you don't already know me, my name's James Minshull. I'm a real estate senior associate at Myerson Solicitors here in Altrincham. I've been working in the property industry now as a solicitor for over 8 years now, and when Steve, our guest, approached me with today's topic, I felt it was pretty important to invite you all here to hear what Steve has to say in light of the coronavirus impact on how workplaces and workforces are having to adapt. Before we get into it, just a small bit of housekeeping. The talk will last for around 15 minutes. It is being recorded and it'll be circulated to those of you who are attending with us today. It will also be posted on the Myerson YouTube channel as well. So that just leaves me to introduce our coffee couch guest today, Steve Upham from Altspace. Steve, would you just give us a little bit of background about you, your business, and the focus of Altspace?
Afternoon, James. Afternoon, everybody. Yes, Altspace has been trading now for 4 years. We offer private offices, hot desks, and meeting spaces to small businesses, freelancers and remote workers across Cheshire. We've been trading for the duration of 4 years since our launch in Altrincham, and we've recently opened a new office in Warrington, and just after the lockdown, which is great timing. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We have a lot of active members. We're very, very flexible with our terms, and so some members, we just see them once a month, and others are in pretty much daily, which means that we've got a nice kind of variety of businesses and individuals mixing in our offices.
Okay. So, apologies, I'm just having a bit of a technical issue with my screen now.
That's all right.
So it's been a challenging time, hasn't it, for businesses? And I'm going to assume that you at Altspace, in your position, you've started to see some trends emerging, no doubt. Can you just give us a bit of an insight into the trends that you're seeing? And no doubt they'll have been accelerated as a result of COVID-19.
Yeah, absolutely. I get the greatest trend that's very widely reported is a lot of people are following advice and working from home. The Office for National Statistics kind of surveyed people in 2019, and around 30% were able to work at home in some capacity. Now, in 2020, in April, that number, they think 46% of the workforce were actively working at home or working for a large part of the week at home. And so companies have had to really rethink how and where their employees work. People have had to adopt agile working, and this is in sectors that haven't really seen that before. If you tried to get through to a customer call centre recently, you'll know what I mean. People are increasingly working at home. That's had a big impact on workplaces. City centres are very quiet. Public transport and rush hour is a bit quieter, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I'm finding that there are days of the week that are busier than others. So people are looking for alternative work venues, and they tend to be concentrated. So people are very productive when they're in the office. So it's almost like a day in, day out strategy that a lot of companies seem to be adopting. So I've noticed that there's been a huge uptake in tech, which is a key office trend for the year. A lot of people have had to really shake up their office systems to get their teams to be as productive as possible. And Zoom is a really good example of this. I personally wasn't a user of Zoom before this year, and I'm not alone there. So a lot of people are teleconferencing and communicating amongst teams on Microsoft, on Zoom. A stat that I love is in 2019, December 2019, not that long ago, Zoom had 10 million active users per day in meetings, and that went up to 300 million April, May this year, which is quite a growth in that company. So people have adopted cloud technology and teleconferencing systems to keep their businesses going, which has been really healthy. And I think my final point really, my third point, companies are looking for increasingly flexible terms. There have been a lot of discussions between landlords and tenants about paying monthly, improving cash flow, projections, and there's been some constructive conversations from my experience whereby clients have come forward and asked for flexibility and looked for kind of means of just getting through this period where, you know, everyone's revenues are taking a hit.
Yeah, it is one of the key impacts of COVID is that virtual office that we're now seeing rather than as opposed to the physical office. Do you think employers and employees are missing out in not having those kind of face-to-face interactions in the physical office environment because of that move towards the virtual office, which has kind of been forced, really?
I think it's incredibly difficult to nurture and create a culture outside of the physical space, and I think for that reason there's always be room for a physical workspace, albeit in reduced fashion. If you're taking on new employees, trying to work with a team, it's very difficult as a senior manager to try and get points across, talk about strategy when you're not in the office with people, and I think that's a real struggle for companies moving forward. I think training is very difficult, and I think culture and training, I think it's going to be particularly hard for people who work in the creative sectors to bridge that gap. So I'm seeing anecdotally in our offices a lot of people who are looking to book team days now in socially distanced manner. So not that many people in for the team day, but a lot of training days. We've had some brainstorming recently, which was interesting to watch, because previously you'll be very close to each other, but people have managed it. It's good to see people and have interactions on a face-to-face level. I think people, and I know we've spoken about this, James, but we're kind of missing the small little chats, aren't we? The water cooler moments. Yeah. About how, you know, United did in Europe the previous night, or about, you know, the latest episode of, you know, The Apprentice or whatever. These are the little kind of chats that people have over a coffee in the morning that I think we're really missing out on a little bit at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. It's certainly something that I think people here at Myerson's feel is that we don't want to lose that culture, and we're doing a lot of what we can to kind of keep that going. So it kind of goes without saying that the impact of COVID has resonated and been felt by many office-based businesses, as well as many other businesses, of course, as well as their workers. From what you've seen within your spaces, because you obviously see businesses and how they're operating on a kind of day-to-day basis, how have those businesses adapted to those challenges?
People have been coming back to the office. Some people can't work at home, so we've remained open since July. We traded in our small offices throughout the lockdown period, interestingly, and some people did come in. And I'm finding numbers of course reduced in offices, in private offices. People are encouraging their employees to work remotely where possible, but they're having team in, team out days, which you could have different departments in on one day, and then you'd have marquee meetings across one day. I think that's a new trend. So when people are in the office, they're really maxing their time in the office, and you haven't got many people who just sat around. The degree of presenteeism, which I think was certainly evident, you know, even up to a year ago, meetings for the sake of meetings, they've gone. There's just no time for them now. You've got to have really constructive face-to-face meetings in the short windows that you have in the office. So I'm finding that the meeting rooms and the offices can be incredibly busy Tuesday to Thursday. Interestingly, Mondays and Fridays tend to be favoured, I'm finding, for people working at home. So that's one trend I've seen. So on the back of that, really, I guess people are looking for a hybrid work model. And I think independent and remote workers are favouring this as well, whereby working from home is brilliant, and we've all proved that with trust from our employer, we can all work productively at home. But it is nice to have a fresh environment. It's good for people's well-being. And so there's a work from home, work from office hybrid model, which I'm seeing at the moment, where people are looking for 2-day packages across the week. Employers are offering people co-working memberships, which I think is very proactive. And so people are kind of trying their hardest, really, just to adapt over this tricky period. I think in terms of office design, there's a lot of chat about reducing desk numbers in offices for safety reasons and having more kind of activity-based working, which is something I've spoken about previously, which is kind of more collaborative spaces in offices. It doesn't all have to be beanbags, it can be just a nice, gentle breakout area. Just something to mix it up for people and to ensure people can meet in a safe environment.
Yeah. Do you think that the kind of the pandemic situation is leading to a bit of a shift, shall we say, from centralism to localism, in terms of people who were once based in the city centres are now looking maybe to be more local based in the local area?
I'd really agree with that, and I've seen a lot of inquiries from people who don't want their teams to get on public transport necessarily and go into the city centre in Manchester. And we've had a couple of clients move from the city centre to our offices in Altrincham because their teams, they don't want them to necessarily have to get on the public transport every day, and they realise it's a real commitment at the moment. So I am seeing that. I will say, I'll caveat that with saying it's very early days, and I wouldn't really forecast it would be the end of people working in big offices and city centres. I don't think that's the case. But I am seeing early signs that people are trying to get out of agreements. I think we'll probably see more of this in 2021, because as we all know, it's not that easy to get out of an agreement with a landlord when you've signed for 5 to 10 years. And so that will take time to trickle out, I think. But what I think will happen in the future is I think there'll be fewer larger offices, huge kind of spaces that are there for vanity purposes for a company, for public relations, really. I think there'll be more satellite offices and smaller bases so that teams can access them more readily.
Okay. I mean, I suppose there's a possibility that if there is that shift, albeit small or large, we can't really forecast that, away from centralism to localism. I mean, that could fuel investment in town centres. More independents might be more minded to stay local to their town centre, and that could fuel local economy as well. So that's a positive to take away from that.
Oh, it's really positive. I'll tell you a really interesting fact, actually, that Regis, the large, international workplace group, we know very well in Manchester, they've been very focused on developing in the city centre. And they've got a huge office now on Deansgate that they're kitting out. They're obviously prominent in spaces in St. Peter's Square. But now they've just changed shift, and they've started saying, well, 2/3 of our offices are actually in suburban and town city locations, which take it as you want. And it's not terribly authentic for me, but they're making a claim to be investing in local suburban offices. And I think that's very telling. And people will increasingly want to work locally. I think it's brilliant that people are investing more in local independent shops. May that continue. And I think it could be a really healthy thing for our communities.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the last thing, I think you might have briefly touched on it before, to do with, and I think it's actually one of the questions that one of the delegates has asked, is it will be interesting to see over the coming 3, 6, 12 months about how many people seek out a co-working space. You mentioned before daily passes. who in fact do have access, whether that be depending on local lockdown or guidance, whether that's full or limited access to a centralised office that's actually provided by their employer. But those people are actually actively choosing to kind of work in a localised co-working space. So it'd be really interesting to see how that develops and something to perhaps keep an eye on.
Yeah, I'd agree. People are certainly enjoying being back in the office. It's been really nice to see and welcome people back since July. And I think people just really miss the opportunity to see familiar faces every day. You wouldn't necessarily be working with somebody, but just the opportunity just to see somebody who you know and ask them how their business is, or how their children are. That's been lovely to see that, and I think these are the interactions that we're missing out on a little bit. They'll return, but maybe things will be a little bit different. But I'm certainly noticing that people are very much enjoying being back and being able to chat to others, and that's really important for all of us, isn't it, to keep going?
Exactly. I'm quite aware of this time. We said at the start that we'd be 15 minutes. We're looking at about 2:15 now. So I think it's best that we wrap it up there, even though I could certainly talk about this for a hell of a lot longer. So thank you for your time today, Steve. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Thank you for joining us. It's an extremely relevant topic, and hopefully it's given us all something to think about in protecting ourselves, those around us, and our families and friends. As mentioned earlier, we'll be sending this video to you all later. You'll also receive Steve and my own contact details at the end. It will come up on the screen there. So that just leaves to thank you again, Steve, for joining us on the Myerson Coffee Couch.
Thank you, James. You're very welcome.